The studio froze. Jimmy Fallon stood there, tears streaming down his face. Denzel Washington stopped the interview cold. And then that voice came through. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Live television has protocols, schedules, commercial breaks timed to the second. The Tonight Show runs like clockwork. Producers have backup plans for backup plans. But no one had a plan for this. No one could have prepared Jimmy Fallon for what was about to unfold in front of 300 people and millions watching at home. This is the story of the night Denzel Washington broke every rule of late-night television to help a man who had spent 20 years making America laugh finally face the one thing he'd been running from his entire career. What happened in those next 8 minutes would change not just Jimmy Fallon's life, but the way we think about vulnerability, masculinity, and what it really means to be strong. If you want to know how this moment became the most watched clip in tonight's show history, subscribe now because what you're about to witness goes deeper than any interview ever has. 3 hours before showtime, Studio 6B hummed with pre-show energy. Jimmy Fallon sat in his dressing room quieter than usual. His assistant noticed the dimmed energy. "I'm always okay," he said with that practiced smile. The smile that hid everything. What producers didn't know, Jimmy had received a call that morning from a hospice facility in upstate New York about someone he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Someone whose voice he'd been avoiding since childhood. The show started like any other night. Monologue killed, audience laughing, cameras rolling. Jimmy was in his element, that infectious energy radiating through Studio 6B. Then came time for the main interview. "Please welcome the legendary Denzel Washington." The audience erupted. Denzel walked out with that commanding presence that had defined a generation of cinema. The two men shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, settled into the interview chairs. Standard opening banter about the new movie, a funny story about the set. Jimmy was doing his job masterfully. But Denzel Washington didn't become one of the greatest actors of all time by not noticing things. He saw something in Jimmy's eyes. A distance. A guard that wasn't usually there. Years of inhabiting characters, of studying human emotion had given Denzel a radar for pain that even the best smile couldn't hide. "So tell me about your prep for this role," Jimmy asked, reading from his cards. Denzel paused, not answering the question. Just looking at Jimmy. "Really?" "Looking at him." "Jimmy," Denzel said, his voice dropping to something quieter, more real. "Can I ask you something first?" Jimmy stopped mid-laugh. The cards in his hand suddenly felt like props in a play he didn't want to perform anymore. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The studio audience sensed the shift. That electric change that happens when real emotion enters a space designed for entertainment. Jimmy tried to maintain his host persona, that shield he built over thousands of interviews. "Sure, of course," Jimmy said, but his voice cracked slightly. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the interview forgotten. "I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell when someone's carrying something heavy. I've carried heavy things myself, and brother, I can see you're carrying something tonight." Jimmy laughed it off, or tried to. "I'm good, man. Just another Thursday night," but Denzel didn't break eye contact. "Is it your father?" The question hung in the air like a grenade. Every camera in the studio was rolling, but it felt like the entire world had shrunk to just these two men in chairs. The Roots had stopped adjusting their instruments. The producers in the control room leaned into their monitors. Jimmy's face changed. The mask cracked. Not all at once, but in that subtle way that only happens when someone touches a wound you've been protecting for years. "What makes you say that?" Jimmy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I know that look," Denzel said. "I wore it for years. That look of a son who never got to say what he needed to say. Who turned success into armor because it was easier than being vulnerable." The studio was completely silent now. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was something else. Something raw and unscripted and dangerous for live television. Jimmy set his note cards on the desk. The sound of them hitting the wood echoed through the studio. "My father's dying," Jimmy said. And just saying it out loud after holding it in all day after years of unspoken words broke something open in him. "I know," Denzel said gently. "And you need to talk to him before it's too late." "I can't," Jimmy said, and tears were forming now, and he tried to laugh them away, but couldn't. "We haven't spoken in 15 years. Not since I got the show." He said things. "I said things and now he's in hospice and I'm here and I don't know how to." Behind the scenes, producers were frantically signaling to cut to commercial. But Denzel Washington made a decision that defied every expectation. He stood up, walked to Jimmy, and placed his hand on his shoulder. "Then we're going to do something," Denzel said. "Right now." "What do you mean?" Jimmy asked, confused through his tears. "I mean, we're going to call him right here, right now on this stage." The producers lost their minds in the control room. This wasn't in the script. This violated every protocol, but the cameras kept rolling because even they knew this was bigger than television. This was life happening in real time. "I can't do that," Jimmy said. "Denzel, there are cameras. There's an audience." Exactly. Denzel interrupted. "There's an audience. 300 people who came here tonight for entertainment. But what they're about to witness is something more important. They're about to see a man be brave enough to be vulnerable. And your father, wherever he is right now, he's about to hear his son's voice. Maybe for the last time." Jimmy looked out at the audience. 300 faces, all silent, all witnessing this moment. Some had tears in their eyes. Others held their breath. Every single person in that studio understood they were watching something that transcended entertainment. "The number," Denzel said. "What's the number?" With shaking hands, Jimmy pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a contact he never deleted but never called. Dad's cell. He stared at it for a long moment, years of hurt and pride and fear wearing in his expression. "I'll dial it," Denzel said, taking the phone. "But you're going to talk." The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Denzel dialed the number, put the phone on speaker. The ringing echoed through the studio sound system. Once, twice, 3 times, then a voice. Weak, tired, but unmistakably the voice of an older man. "Hello." But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Jimmy opened his mouth, but no words came out. 15 years of silence had built a wall too high to climb in one moment. He looked at Denzel with panic in his eyes, shaking his head. I can't do this." Denzel didn't say anything. He just nodded. "You can. You must, Dad." Jimmy finally whispered. And the word broke like a dam. "James." The old man's voice carried confusion, hope, disbelief. "Is that you?" "Yeah, Dad. It's me. Where are you? Are you okay?" And there it was. Not anger. Not bitterness about 15 years of silence. Just a father's first instinct. "Are you okay?" The tears were flowing freely down Jimmy's face now, and he didn't bother hiding them. "I'm at work, Dad. I'm at the show. I'm here with Denzel Washington, and I need to tell you something." "Okay," the old man said, his voice gentle despite its weakness. "I'm sorry," Jimmy said, and the words tumbled out like they'd been waiting years to escape. "I'm sorry for everything I said. I'm sorry for being too proud to pick up the phone. I'm sorry for wasting 15 years because I was too stubborn and hurt and stupid to just tell you that I love you, and I miss you, and I need you to know that before." He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "I know, son," his father said. And now the old man was crying too. And 300 people in Studio 6B were crying, and the Roots were crying, and the camera operators were crying. And across America, millions of people watching this moment unfold were crying. "I know, and I'm sorry too for all of it. But James, you listen to me." "I'm listening, Dad. I have been so proud of you. Every single night, every single show, I watch you make the world laugh. And I think that's my boy. That's my son. And I was too proud to pick up the phone, too. But I've loved you every single day of those 15 years. You hear me?" "I hear you, Dad." Denzel Washington stood there, hands still on Jimmy's shoulder, tears streaming down his own face. This was no longer about him, no longer about the interview, no longer about entertainment. This was about a son and father finding each other again before time ran out. "I'm coming to see you," Jimmy said. "Tomorrow, first thing, I'm going to get on a plane and I'm coming to see you." "I'd like that, son. I'd like that very much." "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, James." The call ended for a moment. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence in Studio 6B was the loudest silence in television history. Then Denzel Washington did something that would become iconic. He took off his suit jacket, draped it over Jimmy's shoulders like a father would, and addressed the audience directly. "This," Denzel said, his voice strong despite his tears, "is what real strength looks like. Not pretending you don't hurt. Not hiding behind success and smiles. Real strength is standing in front of 300 people and millions more at home than saying, 'I'm broken. I'm scared and I need to make things right.' That's courage." The audience rose to their feet, not with the manufactured energy of a TV applause sign, but with the organic, overwhelming recognition that they'd witnessed something sacred. The standing ovation lasted for minutes. They didn't cut to commercial. They didn't cut away. They just let it happen. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Jimmy Fallon wiped his tears, looked at Denzel, and said, "Thank you. I don't know how you knew, but thank you." "I knew," Denzel said, "because someone did the same thing for me once 30 years ago. I was carrying the same weight, and an older actor pulled me aside and told me, 'Don't let pride kill your relationships before time does.' I didn't listen at first, but eventually I did, and it saved my life. So, tonight I'm paying that forward." They embraced not the quick professional hug of show business, but the long, real embrace of two men who both been saved by vulnerability. The rest of the show didn't happen. For the first time in tonight's show history, they ended early. Jimmy looked at the camera and said, "I have to go pack. I have a plane to catch in the morning. Thank you all for witnessing this with me." The next day, Jimmy Fallon flew to upstate New York. He spent 3 days at his father's bedside. They talked about everything. The fights, the misunderstandings, the years of silence. They laughed about memories from Jimmy's childhood. They cried about time wasted. And on the third day, his father passed away peacefully with his son holding his hand. At the funeral, Jimmy wore Denzel's jacket, the same one Denzel had placed on his shoulders that night in Studio 6B. Denzel had given it to him after the show with a note. "This jacket has covered a lot of shoulders over the years. Men who needed to know they weren't alone. Pass it on when you find someone who needs it." The clip from that night became the most watched moment in Tonight Show history. Over 200 million views across platforms. But more importantly, it started a conversation. Men started sharing their stories about wronged fathers, about words left unsaid, about pride and stubbornness and the cost of silence. Jimmy returned to the show 2 weeks later. His first words to the audience were, "My father passed away and I got to say goodbye because someone had the courage to stop an interview and remind me what actually matters." That's the power of showing up for each other. He established a foundation in his father's name, helping families afford hospice care and counseling services. The opening mission statement reads, "In memory of James Fallon, Sr., who taught his son that it's never too late to say I love you." Denzel and Jimmy became close friends after that night. Real friends, not Hollywood friends. And whenever they appear together now, there's an understanding between them. A bond forged not in success or fame, but in the sacred space of human vulnerability. Years later, in an interview, someone asked Denzel why he stopped Jimmy's show that night. Why he risked everything to make that call. Denzel's answer was simple. "Because I know what it's like to lose a father without saying what needs to be said. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone." Jimmy was drowning in his pain, and I had the power to throw him a lifeline. In that moment, the show didn't matter. The cameras didn't matter. What mattered was a son and a father finding each other before time ran out. And Jimmy, when asked the same question, said, "Denzel gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Not the jacket, though I'll treasure that forever. He gave me permission to be human, to stop performing my life and start living it." That night, I learned that real strength isn't hiding your pain. It's having the courage to feel it, share it, and let people help you carry it. The jacket still hangs in Jimmy's dressing room at Studio 6B. On difficult days, he touches it. A reminder that vulnerability isn't weakness, that asking for help isn't failure, that the bravest thing you can do is admit you're broken and need someone to help put you back together. That night on The Tonight Show, entertainment became secondary to humanity. And in doing so, it became the most entertaining, most powerful, most important moment in late-night television history. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for someone isn't to make them laugh. It's to help them cry, to hold space for their pain. To remind them that on the other side of pride and fear and years of silence is something worth fighting for. Connection, forgiveness, and love. Jimmy Fallon's father died knowing his son loved him. And that more than any viral clip or ratings triumph is the real success story. That's the real legacy, not of a comedian or a host, but of a son who found the courage to be vulnerable when it mattered most. And it all started because one man had the wisdom to stop an interview and say, "Let's do what actually matters."